Perfect.
Hello,
Give it up for
everyone.
Tom, everyone.
We need. Oh, thank you. No. It's actually I need the microphone.
Oh.
Yes. Here you go.
Mic'd up, or we're gonna hold it?
No. We'll have the whole. Here you go. So now we need to slow down because it was so many information, and it's we need to slow down and like get some reflection of many different things. I'm Tomasz Witkowski. I'm working with Absen, but also I'm co-founder of Soho Media Club, and we got fantastic panel in here. We got Will from Creative Technology, we got David Levy from ARI, and also we got Kinga Kills. No, Kliss. I'm very sorry. So from an Epic Games Unreal Engine person. So we'll keep this very short, only 40 minutes. So here you go. Kinga, we'll start from you.
All right. Hello, thank you.
And we need another mic. Here you go. Tell us about your role and what you do right now, and etc.
Hello. Oh, yes, I'm working. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I work for Epic Games, Unreal Engine, who is providing the gaming engine behind a lot of virtual production shoots at the moment and workflows in general. I am a technical artist at Epic Games focused on virtual production, and I work at the London Innovation Lab, which is Epic's first customer-facing office, and we can welcome a lot of people interested in Unreal Engine applications, not only film and TV and virtual production, but in many other verticals. I personally focus on virtual production, but this is why sort of my role at Epic is quite diverse, because I get to do a lot of own product testing and development. We work with a lot of third party who's interested in virtual production, and I also am part of some of the trainings we provide. We do some test shoots, we get DOPs in to experience the technology. So yeah, it's a very versatile, ever-changing role, which is wonderful.
It's fantastic. Now we'll pass the microphone to David.
Hi there, I'm David Levy. I'm from ARI Solution Group. It's a new part of ARI, which focuses on the systems integration part of the business we've been doing. So I lead the business development side, so working with customers and understanding how our camera systems, our lighting systems can be designed and developed to produce bespoke production environments like this small LED stage here. I was luckily to be one of the lead project managers on the ARI stage in London alongside Will Case here, and we were also very lucky to be involved in the building and development of the stage, the demonstration stage in Fitzrovia with Epic Games. We have a really good, long-standing relationship with Epic Games. We're very excited to be doing a lot of integration work together. We have a number of plugins we've developed which integrate well into the Unreal Engine, specifically looking at how we get fizz data, focus, iris, zoom data out of the camera in real time back to the engine to help define how the frustum behaves in real time during a virtual production shoot. We're also looking at color very closely because, as you might know, ARI has a long history and obsession with accurate color reproduction. You know, we went through those steps with the digital intermediaries where we took the analog world and we digitized it very successfully. And, you know, I think most of the DPs in here will be very familiar with the look we were able to produce digitally. And now we're also looking at that digital to virtual journey. So how we look at our products in the future, not just as physical hardware, but also as virtual objects which can be accurate simulations of their real world counterparts. I'll pass it over to Will Case now.
Hi, I'm Will Case. I'm Director of Innovation at Creative Technology. I sit in quite a strange space, I suppose, because I'm an ex-creative director, executive creative director from sort of agency side, and I moved into the technology side. And I've been working really for 2 years with ARI and our teams actually exploring and building volumes and working within volumes. So part of my role, which has been because there was no one else doing it, is I've been running as a virtual production supervisor, worked on about 18 big productions for Amazon, Netflix, Apple. I think we've done 20 productions now.
22.
Yeah, 22. So it's been an incredible journey from sort of 0 to 100. And sort of for us, it's all about developing the technology and really trying to get beyond the technology. And for me, it's about what you do with the technology. So I sit very much in a role to work with clients, DOPs, technologists, Unreal, everyone, to try and get beyond the technology to make this work. Because what we found is when we started this journey is that you can drown very, very quickly in the technology. You're already seeing some of the stuff we're talking about here. There's a lot to take in. And the trouble is it's evolving all the time. So if you get yourself as a creative embroiled too much in the technology, you'll find it will take away from the experience. At the end of the day, what we pride ourselves on doing, or trying to do within virtual production, is when you come and you shoot, you shoot. We don't muck around, it's all about the pre-production, it's all about the collaboration, and that's all part of the learning curve of virtual production. But it is one massive collaboration. There's one thing you could ever take away from today, I think you've already heard it today, is collaboration. It is not, we have a joke in our industry, the kind of plug and play show, turn up with a USB, stick it in and get on with it. It just doesn't work like that. And so really it's about everybody coming to the party, parking the egos, and actually getting on with creating what you want to do, which is filmmaking, and create beautiful content.
It's amazing and fantastic. I'm very glad you can make it this panel because it's so important. You know now how to build a studio. You know that it's so many different elements, but it's very important how you run the production and what is happening on the day of the virtual production. Many of you guys in here already experienced the virtual production and the process. And sometimes when you think about that it's easy to just shoot a script. So normally on the traditional shoots, you could do 1.5 minutes per day of the script, and now you can speed up some processes to the 5 minutes of script per day. However, the preparation is the key. And this is why we got Kinga in here as well, because she can explain more about set up the scenes in Unreal Engine and how everything is connected. And also, there is a very direct question to Kinga when it's coming release Unreal 5.1, because everybody is waiting for that. So Kinga, here you go.
Yeah, indeed, it is one of the, I guess we can cover, two birds with one stone here, because I've heard this mentioned earlier today as well, that indeed one of the workflows that a successful virtual production shoot sort of requires is to shift post-production, bits of post-production, into your pre-production, because you rock up on set and you will have something on the screen. That had to be built beforehand. It is a very traditional linear process whereby when you shoot green screen, you shoot whatever your script desired, and then you go into post-production and the scene's being created then and there. So a lot of people actually don't get to see this, whereas with virtual production, you actually shoot with whatever is on the screen already. So you need to have a very talented VAT team, creatives who put that scene together for you. Now, it does require quite a bit of preemptive thinking, and indeed there were some challenges to get accurate frame rates, 24, 25, dependent on your region, sometimes 30, 50 if you are doing short form or advertising. And something that we worked really hard on with Unreal Engine 5 and now 5.1 around the corner is to make sure that creatives can leverage Nanite and Lumen, which are technologies, Nanite referring to the amount of polygons an actor in the scene can have, so a mesh, a car, for example, or a building. It's all made out of polygons, and prior to Unreal Engine 5, 5.1, there had to be a really severe consideration as to how you optimize that asset that you will have in the scene. In 5.1, we made sure that this Nanite technology, which ultimately is a really clever way behind the scenes, making sure that you can have really high poly, really high fidelity assets. So again, car, building, tree, whatever in your scene, and Unreal can figure out a way to optimize that dependent on your camera's position. Same goes for Lumen, which I mentioned, another buzzword, if you will. It is a new type of global illumination, so ultimately how your scene is being lit. It is moving away from really heavily hardware ray tracing, which is basically required a lot of people to invest in heavy hardware, which you still will probably do, but it gives you an option to leverage software ray tracing, which is ultimately what Lumen is doing. And for 5.1 we made sure that we worked really hard to make sure that those can be fully leveraged in a virtual production setting. So yeah, it is. I can't give you a date yet, but it is just around the corner and we're very excited.
It's amazing, and especially now it's happening so much things in Unreal. It was like literally this week was the big Unreal Fest, and it's next year if you can go over there, recommending to go over there. It's totally different world. It's amazing how the two different worlds from gaming and the filmmaking and TV and broadcast merge together for the making some kind of the story. And this story, what we watch later on in the film. Later on, during the different panels, you will see what's going on with right now on the world. Kinga, it's amazing that what you said about frame rate. Frame rate is very important. Cinema content is always 24 frames per second, and it's because of the distribution and the limitation of the servers of the playback. And that one was the case why we shoot the film on 24. On 25 frames per second, we shoot TV content, as you mentioned, and then it's going for the frame rates. It's very important because when you shoot different frame rates, and then you do the color correction later in post-production. This is why everything on the set needs to be set up in the color spaces just right. And actually, I will pass this to David right now, because as we know, Ari is very good with all the color spaces, all the color science.
So what we found was there was always and we see it still today, there's a big disconnect between the virtual backgrounds and the foreground reality. And we figured, maybe there was something we could do to help this process, how to blend the two worlds together, because that's really how you create a realistic image, and create that suspension of disbelief that we're always trying to achieve when telling fictional narrative stories. So what we did was we took our camera, which is technically a very advanced calibration device. We then point at the wall, we run a number of images, swatches, and content in that wall, we record it. But because we are the manufacturer of the camera, what we can do is something quite unique, and we can take the direct off-sensor readout of those images and create a matrix offset, which allows, and that matrix offset is then applied to the content. So instead of trying to match it by eye, or trying to dim it up or dim it down, or trying to figure out a way of how to actually get those two worlds to blend, we use that matrix offset applied to the content to force the content to adopt the visual properties of what the camera would see in the foreground. I hope that sort of makes sense.
It's a good point, because I think one of the things we learned, didn't we, very quickly, is you can walk into a volume or anything of any size anyway, and you can get distracted by the whole space you're in. And so you can look at what you're looking on screen and you get totally distracted by it. It's got nothing to do with it, it's what's in camera. And what we learned very quickly is we were being distracted by the screens, and people were art directing and changing things when you're actually going, no, look in the camera, look in the camera, look in the camera. And actually it's such an important thing. One of the great things about Ari, and I'm obviously quite a fan because I work with them, is that people don't talk about cameras. You generally will hear people talk a lot about LED, you'll hear people talk a lot about the technology, servers, everything else. You never hear people talk about cameras or lighting. It's often, and yet actually it's the most important part of it. You need that colour work, the colour workflow. Your virtual production is nothing without a really good colour workflow, because you can't do you can't grade it. And we know this because we did.
So
you're turning into the sensor. So the other part, apart from forcing that digital content to adopt a visual profile that is what the camera would see, we also really put a lot of importance on good spectral output from proper LED lighting. So although this produces a really great homogeneous base level of light and fantastic for high resolution reflections, what it won't do is produce a very flattering skin tone or accurate skin tone or accurate color reproduction organic materials like clothes or the hull of a ship. So although you do rely on the volume to give you that sort of base level of light, it's really important again to use a good light source to up the overall level of color rendition on those objects and subjects that you're looking at in the foreground. So if your foreground image is not lit properly, then again you won't get that match between the virtual world and the real world. So still using all your normal creative craft techniques that you've been using for the last 100 years, you still light, you know, your foreground image. You don't just rely on the volume for everything, because you'll end up with a very expensive silhouette.
Yeah.
and a very flat image. You really want to be adding contrast control and craft lighting. You know, from a DOP's perspective and the gaffer's perspective, we're still painting the image with light, and we're still creating depth and three-dimensionality with normal, you know, lighting fixtures, whether it's tungsten or LED, it doesn't really matter. All those same craft techniques that you use in a traditional location or studio setup are valid. It's just you have this amazing three-dimensional light painting behind you as well, in combination with.
And this is the important thing. I believe so. The best practice on the film set, and especially on the virtual production, is we get the DIT who knows exactly what he's doing with the assets which is coming from the camera, but also he can check as well some information with the objects which is seen and really seen. And I believe so. The best practice would be have a daily colorist on the set as well, just to match all of this together. Because I don't know if you were working on the film set where the colorist was there and working very closely with DP and also with the person who is working on Unreal Engine or any server.
It's vital, and they're also an added QC, because when you're in these environments and you're shooting and it is quite high pressured and people are focused on one part of the image, they might not realize there's an artifact or some sort of unwanted effect in the background. So your DIT along with your virtual production supervisor, they're running a QC on that image throughout the whole production, going, oh wait, stop there, you can't use that, let's go again, there seems to be a fault with that image and so on.
And it seems to be a little bit different as well, the film process, feature film process, than it is to advertising or commercials process. There is a different way that it's approached. I think a lot more is spent on colour in feature film, in the way that they're more colour critical, the way they're looking at things. They often come with a creative LUT that they're putting on the output to do the, you know, to look at it on, which you don't tend to do so much in the commercials world. So there are slightly different workflows. I think they can learn from each other in some respects. But
It's great. By the way, we got a lot of acronyms in here. So DIT is a digital image technician, and we were talking another acronyms. If you don't, QC, so it's a qualification control. So we just need to repeat the different acronyms. And sometimes, by the way, there is a virtual production dictionary as well, which is created by collaboration of many different people. So recommending for that as well. So back to color settings. So who is setting a color in the scene?
So previously to Unreal Engine 5, Unreal was working with an implicit color space, which was linear sRGB. Reason behind that, fairly simple. Unreal is primarily a gaming engine, so the assumption always had been that people are looking at it through your regular office monitor, right? Because you're playing, or on your TV. Not really through something that tends to be, I don't know, 10 meters by 30. So this was something that we actually learned by collaborating, exactly how it was mentioned. This is how we all learn and can make sure that we create a product that everyone's really happy to use. So we learned that indeed in film and TV, linear sRGB might not be the working color space. So in Unreal Engine 5 now, we have an option to select your working color space, which is, I know it sounds very much a small improvement, but from feedback what we got was that people were really happy about this because they could make sure that indeed they set a working color space for the artist as well. And in Unreal Engine, we have worked with several partners and created something that is an open source color configuration that you can set up in Unreal Engine, which ultimately, as David was explaining as well, can make sure that we don't really work for whatever we see with our eyes on the screen, but will work for the camera. And so exactly what David described, we have a matrix that we can reference that says, hey, I am coming from this color space. My wall is PQ encoded, say, and so this is how the colors will be represented on the wall for the camera to be able to read an HDR image that can be processed later on. So on sort of the operations side, Unreal is just referencing a matrix that had been created. So it's, for the operators, it is a really easy process, and they're told normally what that color space is. And it is really, really, as much of Unreal's workflow is really iterative, because if there is something that changes or there's a scene that requires a different setup, it is super easily and quickly changeable. We also make sure that you have per viewport OCIO, so if you know that your ceiling is at a different panel, it will be filmed and hit with lighting differently. You can apply a different matrix lot basically on it, so it is really iterative and really easy to sort of set up on the operational panel. Honestly, like, that is the potentially easiest for an operator to do, because it is, all the math is done sort of outside and it's only referenced.
It's very precise information. And definitely, definitely you need to have the calibrated monitors, and this is so important thing to have this on the set. And it's a very important thing to work with colorists and with the post-production facility later, that all the workflows are the same and the calibration is working on the same way. So this is why the post-producers, they always invite a calibration team from the post-production. Actually, I got one question, which is it's an interesting one. So, what are the challenges and what are the limitations of virtual production right now?
I think it's been a really interesting journey. I think what we're seeing is that it's very easy to say challenges and say, oh, there's challenges, there's a challenge. I kind of like to look at it slightly different. I think it's about how using the technology in the right way. I think everybody's trying to use this to replicate reality. And often they're replicating something you could do in real life anyway. And I think creatively it hasn't really taken off yet. I don't think it's got into the hands of the creatives in the way that it needs to get into. And I think when that happens, I think you're going to see a real change in virtual production and how it's used. That's very much more in the commercial side of it than the filmmaking side of it, and I think. But I think the biggest sort of barrier to this at the moment is people. It's talent, it's knowledge, it's understanding. It's about having real-world experience of virtual production and how it actually works. It is evolving, it's a changing. So we've done 20 shoots on our stage, whatever it is, none of them are the same. 2D, 3D, whatever, not one production I could say is the same as the other one. So therefore, there's a lot of talk about, pipelines, workflows, yes, to make things work better, and for them to be a better experience to the person or the team coming in. And I think that's the most important thing to focus on, is what is the experience you have as a filmmaker and a team and a production company to come in and shoot in virtual production? Because that's the bit that needs really sorting out and make that easier for people to be able to shoot well and to be able to get out of it what they've actually paid to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a film shoot. You come to do a film shoot.
To Will's point here, I do think it's a really interesting space that we find ourselves in, because it's a space in virtual production that pushes people together who come from traditional film production, potentially theatre, lighting, live events, and gaming technologies, real-time technologies. And it is what I really love about our industry, and I think this panel shows it off really, really well, is really open collaboration. Because we know that it's still such a new I say new, it's not that new, but we're constantly pushing, and it's always on such a bleeding edge that the only way to create something that people will love working with is open collaboration, sharing of knowledge, and getting together and sharing that knowledge back out to you lovely people. So indeed it's a lack of people, but it's also, I think, what I do find that I really love about this is we're not really protective of the knowledge. We want to make sure that it is openly out there. Everyone's open for discussions, and I think this is why the adoption was quite quick and rapid.
And I think there's a classic, we have a bit of a quote from one of our CEOs from a company called Halon, who are one of our content of our company. And he has this quote he says that always reminds him of when I met him, which was, if you come for an interview and you say you're an expert, you don't get a second interview. and I think that's a really good point. You know, I've only been doing this, David, we've only been doing this for 2 years, and we still are learning something new every single day, and I'm by a long way nowhere an expert at this. Every shoot is different, so it is important that everybody parks those and actually works together to get out what they want, because it's just, there's no point. It's never going to work.
And I think realistically, you need to start with your script. Look at your script, and if fundamentally it's not right for VP, you don't do it. But there's lots of cases when you're looking for your script where VP can be the solution, and it's working with producers, it's working with non-technical people, with creatives, with the people in charge of the budgets, the businesses, the insurance policies, and really analysing those scripts and saying, well, this section here, this is VP. This is where VP actually solves a problem instead of trying just like, let's do everything in VP. And it's like, no, there are certain things which work very well, and there are certain things which would obviously be much cheaper doing on location or on a film set. So it's really working with the producers, with art department really early on, getting everyone right at the start to identify which bits are suited for vertical reduction, because if you don't at those early stages, you will run into some fundamental issues and problems with not being prepared properly to entering a volume, because there is a lot of prep work involved. But if you do that prep work, if you are disciplined, if you do make a few creative decisions up front, you can do something quite special, and it is time saving, money saving, but also being able to tell stories without compromise and producing. I mean, this is always the thing from the Aries perspective, you know, we want to produce the highest possible image quality. But that only happens if you do treat it in a different way. You have to be disciplined, and you have to talk to each other, and you cannot be siloed.
They are very demanding.
They are very demanding. They are. We just did a shoot. It should have been a 2-day shoot with 5 weeks of prep. We did it in 2 weeks of prep and 1-day shoot, and it was emotional.
I think it's Asa. Asa was talking later, I think.
Yeah, Asa was the VP. Yeah, but we all had a great time as well. So that was the other side. Although we were completely exhausted and broken by the end of it, everyone in that room was enjoying themselves. We were achieving final pixel imagery, like Michael said, on the day, at the time of capture. The agency were blown away. The director was having fun. The DOP was having fun. He was doing things. When we first met with Hunter for that shoot, he was very nervous. He was trying to approach it in a hesitant way, and we were just constantly saying to him, like, look, this space is, you control every exposure and pixel in this environment. And he's like, but how do we light it? It's like, how you want to light it? How do you want the image to come out at the end? That's the correct image. And especially in a short form like that, where there's no continuity across a huge series, you can be a bit more free and a bit more creative. And by the end of the day, he was flinging light cards around. He was doing all sorts of wild, sort of exciting in-camera VFX, and it was a real pleasure to see that. But it does come with a price. You should prepare properly before entering these spaces.
So this is another question. It's interesting. So which the most interesting project you were working recently on? Actually, we start from Kinga.
It's going to be a very easy one. Unreal Engine 5.1. It is very, that is something that we've been looking at, obviously, and there's going to be some amazing new features coming out. Also, some quality of life improvements that the lovely folks who are putting the whole thing together back there will also benefit from. Anyone who's working on a virtual production set and operating, because it does require quite a lot of knowledge and a lot of agility to be able to respond to the OPs and directors' fast demands. Move that light over there, change brightness here. Can you rescale that rock, etc. So there's a lot of these sudden demands, and one of the really cool things. Are we about? Am I good to talk some features?
Yeah, go ahead.
This
go
is
ahead.
all personal because I come from this, right? But like I'm here to be really excited about the fact that there's a dedicated operation panel now in Unreal Engine 5.1 that will be coming out. So yeah, again, not available on Git if you want to precompile it. But basically, it's a dedicated operation panel. We have some 2D light cards which are snapping on to the screen as well. Those light cards can be driven by DMX, which is phenomenal because, as many people will know, obviously all lights can be DMX as well. So you ultimately can also give some control for the virtual light to someone who is very traditionally lit before, maybe has not touched Unreal Engine, doesn't really know where to click, where the buttons are. Those attributes for the light cards that are going to be virtually present on the screen will be exposed to DMX as well and can be driven as such. That's something very, very exciting. And there's, oh gosh, there's so many. I did write them down, which ones to list, but anyway, so point being, Unreal Engine 5.1 had been the most exciting thing I've been working on lately. There's some other bits I can mention. For example, you can now render out the end display, which is sort of what is driving the scene on the wall. Outputs as well from movie render queue. There's bunch of other quality of life improvements there as well. So yeah, very excited. Still ongoing, but very exciting. And with regards to cameras as well, we have an extended lens calibration tool now in Engine that's been, we've been quite hard at work personally as well on that. And just some really, really cool stuff. And I really hope that obviously once it's out, it's just not going to be me gushing about it, but hopefully people will actually find it helpful and useful. So yeah.
It's a fantastic update. And David, because you not working only on the set, but you also develop the different studios and the programs.
Yeah, so I can't say anything. We're not allowed to say what we're doing to anyone. But I mean, I think Ari's approach with all these types of things, these technologies, we don't build tools for engineers. We build tools for creatives. So everything we're sort of focusing on is simplification and automation of complex processes, because you don't want to be an engineer on set. You want to create images and tell stories. So we're doing a lot of hard work in the background to try and automate some of the more complex processes, and just to make it easy, logical, and user-friendly, because at the moment it can be quite hostile. Mm-hmm. So our approach of this is making new products which are easier. Some of the virtual products, I can't really talk about in too much depth, but they'll be coming out soon for people to try out. And then also the part of the business which I am, which is the systems integration part, is designing, building, and kitting out stages for bespoke production requirements, whether it's broadcast, live events, film and episodic television. We're very excited to be building these types of stages with our people in mind, the craft people and the filmmakers, rather than it being too clinical and robotic. We're thinking about creatives in our next product developments.
Fantastic. Will?
I mean, this year I think we've been to the centre of the Earth, been to space, had a fight in a Rolls Royce down Bond Street. I think we've been around the world about 3 times, everything done. I think the last project we just did for Volvo, which is a big keynote, was very technically challenging. We did Houdini nanite real-time renders numeration stuff into the back screen and then into the front, sort of front plate comping in real time, so that the keynote speaker is actually standing in the middle of the animation, and then doing that in real time on a front and back plate coming out, and then recording that straight out of camera. So that was quite a challenge. We've got a project we're doing an internal project, which is quite exciting, which is nice because that's what's great about the collaboration. Really, we're going to do a project with our friends at Lux Machina as well, and Halon within Group and Ari, and we're going to do a self-funded project working with real-time lighting in the virtual world into the digital world, and then connecting the two together, but controlling exactly what you were talking about. But we've got a little bit of sort of groovy stuff we've done behind the scenes to make that work, so everything works simultaneously. You can control basically digital twins.
Don't give it away.
No.
I don't know.
I went to see it.
Yeah, I have to come and watch it.
But I mean, there's some, some really interesting ways of, I think, looking at the way that we use tools to be more creative with the spaces and the experiences we do. And I go back to that thing about, I think, someone made a quote, I can't remember what it was, saying, you wait till the creatives get hold of this. And I really, really believe that. What we're seeing at the moment, I feel, personally, from working out, is quite pedestrian, what we do with it. We're mimicking real life to de-risk things, which is fantastic, and it has a massive place for it. However, we can create worlds that don't exist and go to space and do all this kind of stuff. What you haven't really seen is the real abstraction of this technology being used to create worlds that really do not exist. And the way that the other industries, from television, broadcast,
Fashion.
and fashion, and all these kind of things will start pushing the boundaries of how they use this technology, and that's what really excites me about it. And I think I love what we're doing now, and I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I love seeing people come into the studios and hear their creative, and just, wow, how are we going to do this? And it is, every journey is different. But I'm still yet to see that one yet to come in. We're beginning to see the treatment starting to come in where you're going, yes, now we're going somewhere. Now we're doing something really, really challenging and really interesting that people haven't seen before. And I think that's really exciting.
What I am proud of what we've done over this last 2 years is we did make a commitment, we did put our own hand in our pocket to learn how to do this so we could support others and to teach them as well, allow them to learn how to do it without the enormous risk that this can represent in real terms. We together, and again, it was only part of a collaboration that we could de-risk it for ourselves, but we have we put a lot of time and effort and thought and resources into developing this space, but we're excited to see where it goes.
I mean, we joke, we always, often people ask you workflows and teams. It's always something about teams. What does it take to run a stage? And I think we joke, when we started, we thought we needed 3 people.
On the beginning, yeah,
and that's
definitely.
a 6 node, 30 meter. We thought we needed 3 people. I think we're now 8.
For
Just
3D
And
content,
as a
3D content, you need 8 people minimum as a team to be able to do.
And this is just playback. We're talking only
without
about
DPs,
playback.
without gaffers, without producers,
Exactly.
without first ADs, runners, grips. It's just for playback,
That's
automation.
what we feel comfortable. And actually, no, it's more. It's probably about 10 actually. We're tracking.
Yeah.
But that's what we feel comfortable now. Is a responsible place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Where that if you are coming in and you're shooting, and you're spending time and you are spending money, that is the team that is needed to support a successful production. On the scale where, on any scale, but also from an engine point of view. We used to have those, we used to call it the person who got squeezed. And it was always the person when they started, you'd sit on engine, and they were the technical artist, creative artist, and playback. And they'd sit there, and these poor individuals would be sitting there, and it was a nightmare. Everyone's just shouting at them. So now we've had to make that into 3 roles.
Exactly. Even in here right now, you will see later on the case study what we do in here as well. We got the whole team behind there. We got the audio team in there. We got the whole team with actually running the stage today. So we'll move a little bit because it's a one more question. However, anybody got the question from the audience, because you are here to ask the questions and you are here to know more. Anybody got the question to the panelists? Here you go.
Thank you very much. Very insightful so far. I was just interested, you were talking about shooting natively at 24 or 25 with the likes of Cameron and Ang Lee and Peter Jackson, etc., having, with varying degrees of success, shot at 48, 60 or 120. Have you had any experiences of that? And if so, how were the experiences, good or bad, just so that we know basically, because obviously it's something with the frame rate that the creatives have thought about.
I mean, we've done a couple of 50s. We can do 60. We've done that. We can do that day in, day out. Not a problem at all. I think from a camera point of view, it's a technology thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are limitations with it at the moment. Again, it depends on how fast your refresh is on your video wall, but it also, Windows doesn't have every frame rate available in its playback. So, but you know, these are problems we're solving. I mean, if it's a multiple of the base frame rate, we can usually get away with that all the way up to 60. But after 60, it is proving a bit more difficult. The guys at Pixamondo did successfully some shoots where they went above 60, but it was, from what I understand, it was quite a laborious, slow process of tweaking and just walking it in just to get it actually working, and not quite as scientific as we might like it to be.
Yeah, we're talking about normal cameras as well, but the virtual cameras, which frame rate it can support.
I mean, virtual cameras, it's not really a question, I guess, on our end. It's more back to what Will and Dave were saying, is that in these higher frame rate scenarios, like if you imagine we're trying to harmonize systems that were created sort of completely independently from one another and now brought together in this weird space that is virtual production, and we try to push them to the limit. They were never meant to work together. We just have cables with copper in them that manage to transfer data. So it is something that that I think still requires a lot of R&D, and there's development still going on this. And also bear in mind that there's some new improvements just around the corner with SMPTE2110 integration, which will take away from HDMI, the EP cables as well. That will help, for example, data from Unreal Engine travel faster as well to the walls. So that can also decrease latency from the image being produced on the graphics cards in Unreal Engine as well, getting to the wall. Equally, again, reduces the latency from that data getting back to the camera, etc. So all these improvements are still ongoing, but we still need to test, and there's a lot of hardware behind this as well, and a lot of understanding, a lot of open communication of, hey, how have you been using it? And this is something that I think I'd proudly say we're pretty good at.
Hardware is a classic. So
yes, the
fact.
fact.
Yeah, hardware, and you go great, and you go, well, yeah, but if you make that faster, we need more power, which costs more money, and more. You know what I mean? And everything goes up. I mean, we had a layers when we first started. We make all our own servers, so it's all bespoke how we do it, and it's all done because we work in live event. We couldn't work out why it wasn't working properly, and then we worked with your team, and it came back. It's because we're running bespoke software, because Unreal is built to work on a home computer. Yeah. So we had to go back and reinstall Windows 2020 or whatever it was, and have everything running on because that's the nature of why it's built and what it's done. So all this learning curves of technology and innovation, everything goes through it. There's a lot of things in the chain. So one small thing, like you're saying, let's go to 60. The knock-on effect of just everything in the chain is, I think, a lot of what people don't realise is, especially as you get bigger on scale, it's massive. Just one. I mean, we now can switch from 24 to 25 to 30, 24, 96.
Exactly.
But now we can do it, but we couldn't. It used to take us a day to switch frame rate.
It was amazing with Angli, what you said. It was 120 frames per second. The problem was that there were no servers in cinemas to play back that. So it was cut down to 60 frames per second, 48 frames per second. With Angli shoots was actors couldn't have the makeup because you can see everything on the 4K on the high frame rate, that they couldn't have the makeup, so they were needed to eat well before the shoots. They were needed to take care about themselves, and also every single panning was so precise. And it's the same with virtual production. If you put anything over there, the power processing is so huge. And bear in mind as well, if you shoot higher and higher frame rate, and the PQ and HDR, the data is bigger and bigger. So currently now what you capture, it's around 120 terabytes of the data from normal feature film. But when it's a high frame rate, it can go even to 300 or to 400 terabytes of the data. So just to let you...
And all the data from the 3D camera?
Exactly.
All that kind of stuff you've got to capture then at that rate, so that you're tripling the amount of data that you've got to clean up. Everything's just
And this is why the pre-production is important again, because we have, when you're having, it's like, what is your base frame rate? What are you planning to shoot at? Because if you turn up and go, well, I want to do 120, you're like, you didn't fill in the questionnaire, which said you wanted. And we have a questionnaire which everyone ignores, even though we really try to push people to be disciplined and say, what are you planning to shoot? And we also have a deliverables document for all the assets, because there's naming conventions, and again, everybody ignores it and just they fling a load of unnamed files at you, and they go, that should be up first. Well, which one? The one that says 1 on it. You know, it's all that kind of planning and consideration that really needs to happen.
I just wanted to add, I did see projects that had not this level as the title of the scene that was meant to be loaded. So, yeah.
We got time for one more question from the audience. Anybody? Here you go.
As a DP, should I be learning how to use Unreal? Is that simple?
It's a tricky one. I think yes, some DPs use it for previs or TechViz. I think it's really, really useful for TechViz. I think what we do is we work with DPs, we work with teams where we give them our setup of our studios so that they can, in our end display and stuff, so they can actually use it to previs. I think it's a really useful tool. I think the challenge with all these things is that it is a massive beast of a piece of software, and you start scraping the surface, and before you know it, you're swallowed. And you actually, so if you use it for what you need it to use it for, I think it's absolutely brilliant.
What I've found is that when DPs do a virtual production shoot and say it's their first one, and as you guys mentioned as well, by the end of the day, there's some realization that they get to control everything. And you'll find that indeed Unreal is, when you open it, it's very overwhelming. It's a lot of things there. But the values that you'd be dialing in will become, like, you realize how familiar they are. They work sort of the same way, but instead of dialing it in on, for example, a panel that you use, like a DMX panel, etc., you type in the numbers there. The cameras work this, sort of same way, in the sense that you get to select your film back, you get to tweak ultimately clipping planes, etc. So there's a bunch of things that you will be familiar with already. And what I found is that a lot of DPs at the end of those shoots, they go away, they never opened Unreal before, and they come back to us and say, oh, by the way, I actually opened Unreal and I just put this scene together, and I know it doesn't look very good, but it doesn't matter. Like, you open it, you had fun with it, you realize how iterative it is, and how quickly indeed you can preview and just put blockouts together and use cameras and set up those cameras that you can see what you might use on set. You'll have a starting point which will automatically feed into the pre-production process. And the more people open it, the more people use it, the less scary that pre-prep phrase is.
But that's the collaboration.
Yeah, and essentially it's a very sophisticated storyboard. And I really highly recommend previs and techviz before you, again, at those early pre-production stages. And the amazing thing about those assets and those low resolution worlds you build as templates for your previs and techviz, if you do it correctly, those eventually become the final pixel assets. Mm-hmm. And that's a real big value of why you start in Engine and you just iteratively build that in quality level until you can display it on the video wall in, photorealistic.
But that's the brilliance of what we do. This is the big change. I think is about the fact that you've moved into real-time technologies. This did not exist 2 years ago. The fact that you can go from end to end in the same engine, previs, techviz, display, all the way through to end to post, and continue in one engine and have the ability to do that. So the job, we just did the whole thing in previous TechViz, go into motion control, take motion control data from the TechViz into motion control, comes back out, 3D data comes back, and then comp back in engine, in the same place with the same data. That's revolutionary. That is extraordinary. We're not using 10 different tools, we're using one in the middle. And I think that is where the real change is going to happen in this industry, is the way that everybody not has to work, but that real-time workflows, working in a real-time way, is just changing everything. And I think for me, that's the most exciting thing about it.
Just lastly, are you finding that the DPs are usually involved at the beginning?
Yeah.
Or are they just...
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Depends. We would love them to be more there, but sometimes schedules become quite difficult for individuals.
And it's not the schedule, it's money as well. So, I believe so. We can wrap up this panel. We'll do a break for coffee and tea and water, whatever you desire. Quick vape and smoke, if anybody is doing that. And after that, we'll have the very special thing. So people will work in here and they will prepare the very nice scene. So I would like to thank you for everyone for for this panel, and especially you guys. And they are here, so ask the questions even more and more. So thank you so much for this.